Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories today. Donald Trump's new tariffs have taken effect as markets throughout Asia plunge. He calls the fall in stock a necessary medicine, while the US Treasury Secretary tells citizens there's no reason to fear a recession despite expert warnings. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says there has been no word from the United States since Vladimir Putin rejected a temporary ceasefire deal. A Russian envoy says US ceasefire mediation efforts could resume next week as fighting continues. The leader of France's National Rally Party has called her conviction for embezzling EU funds a political decision and vowed not to give up her political aspirations. She says she will fight the ruling which came last week and bars her from the 2027 presidential race. A Palestinian teenager with US citizenship has been killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. This comes as Gaza rescuers report that Israeli strikes have killed 44 people in the past 24 hours. As nightly protests continue in Turkey, the main opposition has called for early elections to be held in November. The opposition leader has vowed to keep up protests against the jailing of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. Heavy rains in the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, have left around 30 people dead and caused widespread destruction. Flood victims either drowned or died when their homes' walls collapsed. A manhunt is underway in Western Germany after 3 bodies were found in a residential building. The small village of around 2,200 people has been cordoned off, and a helicopter is being used to track the fleeing suspect. A second child has died from measles as the outbreak continues to spread in the US state of Texas. The child was unvaccinated and had no underlying health conditions. US Secretary Robert F. Kennedy is facing backlash over his handling of the crisis. Our top story today, US President Donald Trump continues to defend his sweeping tariffs despite the market turmoil and continuous calls of trade war. He further went on saying foreign governments would have to pay a lot of money to lift sweeping tariffs that he characterized as medicine, prompting further carnage in global financial markets. Asian markets posted steep losses, ranging from Japan's Nikkei 225 dropping by 6.3% to Australia's ASX 200, which dipped by 6%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng down by 9.8%, as well as the US market is expecting its worst fall in nearly 40 years, registering further concerns that Trump tariffs could lead to higher prices, weaker demand, and a potential global recession. US officials say that more than 50 countries and territories have reached out to Washington for trade talks. Here is what US President Donald Trump and the US Treasury Secretary had to say.
I can't tell you, but I can tell you our country has gotten a lot stronger. And eventually, it'll be a country like no other. It'll be the most dominant country economically in the world. I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix it.
More than 50 countries have approached the administration about lowering their non-tariff trade barriers, lowering their tariffs, stopping currency manipulation, and they've been bad actors for a long time, and it's not the kind of thing you can negotiate away in days or weeks. There doesn't have to be a recession. Who knows how the market is going to react in a day, in a week. What we are looking at is building the long-term economic fundamentals for prosperity.
We are joined by Ambassador Suresh Goel, former diplomat located in New Delhi, to discuss this further. Thank you very much for joining us. Ambassador, I want to get your thoughts on the Asian market plunging. Indian shares have opened up 5% lower today. As we've said before, Japan's Nikkei 225 has dropped by 6.3%. What do you think of this market turmoil in Asia?
I think most of the economists had expected this market turmoil, as you said, or the downturn in the equity market as a result of the increase in tariff because of the obvious impact it would have on the exports from India and the other Asian countries to the USA. And as a result of the diminishing exports, the downfall in the exports, most of the industry would be affected, resulting in the investor confidence. At the same time, we also will have to look at the foreign investments coming into India as a result of these tariff policies. Because of the differential tariffs, there is a speculation that many of the companies may look at India as the manufacturing base. If that happens, that is good. But in the short term, I expect that this downturn in the market is going to continue for quite some time. Till things stabilize, I would give it at least another 1 week or two till the tariff discussions of the tariff impact is more or less stable. So there we are. But at the same time, I would like to add one more thing. President Trump has poo-poohed the prospects of a recession as a result of his tariff policies. However, most of the experts are clear that a bigger danger of these things would be the recession, because the production is going to go down as a result all over globally as a result of these tariff policies, including in the USA.
Yes.
And therefore, the consumption demand is going to go up. It's a problem. It's a huge problem.
Ambassador Gul, what do you think about Donald Trump, the US president's language in this whole thing? Obviously, you have experts all around the world warning against these tariff policies. And you see stocks also falling around the world, whereas
Yes.
Donald Trump still remains positive and consistent about how this is going to go. What's your thoughts on that?
Nothing. I mean, he's the president. He has his own way of working, and he showed how he had calculated the tariffs on different countries. And when the people who know economics, when they looked at the calculation, the way he had calculated, they snickered at it. Really, they didn't know how he could have really come to that kind of a conclusion. But he is the president, and he has the capacity to take the decisions. He can go against any kind of economic advice. So there we are. We are in hands of some powers who have their own agenda and who are taking decisions, even if they do not have the full understanding of the impact of the decision. We will have to live with it now.
Ambassador Suresh Goel, thank you for joining us. You are staying
Thank you.
with us. We move on now. US President Donald Trump says peace talks are underway with Russia as the White House pushes for a resolution to the Russia-Ukraine war. Speaking aboard Air Force One, Trump told reporters that Washington is urging Moscow to stop the violence. His remarks come as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirms Ukraine has accepted a US-backed proposal for a full unconditional ceasefire, but claims Russia is refusing to comply. Zelensky also criticized the US for what he called a weak response to a deadly missile strike in his hometown of Kharkiv, which killed 18 people, including 9 children. This is what the US president had to say.
Припинення вогню то безумовне і таке, що взагалі не дозволяє знищувати життя. Україна погодилась на пропозицію Америки. На пропозицію повного, безумовного припинення.
Meanwhile, Russia has intensified attacks across Ukraine, including in Kyiv, where explosions were reported overnight. Despite a temporary pause in strikes on energy infrastructure, both sides accuse each other of violations. We are once again joined by Ambassador Suresh Goel, former diplomat located in New Delhi, to discuss this further. Ambassador, these talks are obviously ongoing, contradictory to Donald Trump's previous statement during his election where he said he'd end the war in 1 day. This hasn't seemed to have happened. Obviously, you have two sides which refuse to get in the same room as each other, which also accuse each other of violations on an already very minimal ceasefire of energy infrastructure. What are your thoughts on that, and how can you see this moving forward if they can't keep, if both sides are accusing each other of violating these terms even before we've reached the first hurdle?
President Trump thought that if he could enforce a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, that would be the end of the war. A ceasefire is not the end of the war. At the most, a ceasefire is a very, very temporary halt in military activities, and very fragile at that, really, which could actually change any moment, and that is happening now in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. Because the problem really here is, and I don't know whether President Trump understands it or not, that unless Europe is part of the negotiations, unless Europe is there to back the process, any process is going to remain very, very fragile. And here we notice that immediately after the ceasefire on energy infrastructure of the two countries, European countries, they got together and they decided to back Ukraine. And in a sense, that gave encouragement to Ukraine. And even though there are claims and counterclaims from both the sides about violations of ceasefire, and both the countries are doing it, there's no doubt about it really whatsoever, because nobody trusts each other. And unless there is a trust, or there is some kind of a trust in the processes which is going to follow, it is not going to stop. Whether President Trump claims 1 day, 2 days, or 7 days, unless Europe is part of the process, it is going to remain very volatile.
Ambassador Gul, obviously we've seen the United States mediate this possible ceasefire deal, but President Zelensky also saw an attack on his hometown over the past couple of days, a very severe attack which led to the death of 18 people. The lack of response from the US angered him a little bit. He said he was grateful of other countries who did condemn the attack. What are your thoughts on the mediation efforts by the US and the lack of condemnation by Donald Trump in this deadly attack on Zelensky's hometown?
I guess because any sporadic kind of responses or reactions are not going to work in this case. And I do hope that, and it does depend a lot on the USA, how they are able to get different actors together in this whole game. And I do hope that now President Trump's team is thinking of how this can become a more enduring kind of a process. And as I said again, these kind of attacks and counterattacks will continue. They are to be condemned, there's no doubt about it. The least that USA could do is to basically make a statement criticizing those attacks from either side. But total silence from President USA clearly indicates that they think Russia is serious about the ceasefire and the process. I also hope that Russia is serious about this process, and I also hope that Ukraine is serious. But more than all anything, I hope that Europe is actually serious about ending the war.
Ambassador Suresh Goel, thank you very much for joining us. We move over to Europe now, where Marine Le Pen has vowed to fight on after a court banned her from running for office for 5 years over a misuse of European Union funds. Speaking at a rally near the Eiffel Tower, she called the verdict a witch hunt and a political decision. Le Pen was found guilty of helping embezzle nearly €3 million and handed a 4-year prison sentence, 2 of which are suspended, plus a €100,000 fine. Let's take a listen to what Marine Le Pen said.
La ligne de conduite ne sera jamais celle de la brutalisation, chère à d'autres formations politiques, mais celle pacifique du pasteur Martin Luther King pour les droits civiques des citoyens américains à l'époque opprimés et privés de droits. Nous entendons pour cela inviter tous les Français épris de liberté à s'engager à nos côtés dans une résistance pacifique et démocratique, une résistance populaire et patriotique.
National Rally President Jordan Bardella called it a direct attack on democracy and warned it was meant to sideline Le Pen ahead of the 2027 presidential race. Though she's appealing the verdict, many in her party are already looking to Bardella as a possible successor. Here's what Bardella said during the rally.
Judiciaire injuste et scandaleuse prononcée contre Marine et visant à l'éliminer de la course à la présidentielle est d'abord une attaque directe contre la démocratie, une blessure pour des millions de Français patriotes. Ce n'est pas seulement absurde et révoltant, c'est une provocation face à laquelle il nous appartient de défendre notre honneur et de défendre jusqu'au bout notre innocence.
French government officials pushed back, with Prime Minister Gabriel Attal saying, "You steal, you pay," while accusing foreign leaders like Trump and Orban of interference. Despite the ban, the case may not be resolved before summer 2026, leaving Le Pen's candidacy technically still possible. A recent poll shows that most French voters believe the ruling was fair, but political fallout is just the beginning. Let's take a listen to what the opposition leaders had to say.
L'extrême droite, pour ceux qui en doutaient, montre son vrai visage. Il ne suffit pas de porter des cravates à l'Assemblée nationale. L'extrême droite est un parti dangereux, dangereux pour la démocratie, dangereux pour l'état de droit. C'est un parti violent qui menace, y compris les juges quand les décisions prises par la justice ne leur conviennent pas.
We move to the Middle East now, where a Palestinian-American teenager, 14-year-old Omar Mohammed Rabia, was shot dead by Israeli forces in the West Bank town of Termus Aya on Sunday. The Israeli military claimed the teens were throwing rocks and posed a threat to civilians. However, Palestinian officials condemned the incident as an extrajudicial killing, accusing the Israeli forces of acting outside the law. This incident comes amid escalating violence in the West Bank, where Israeli military operations against groups have intensified. In Gaza, the Civil Defense Agency reported that Israeli airstrikes killed at least 44 people on Sunday, including 21 in the southern city of Khan Yunis. One strike hit a group near the bakery in Gaza City, killing 6 people. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed a strong response to rockets fired from the Hamas-ruled territory, further worsening tensions in the region. The death toll from the airstrikes is expected to rise as the conflict continues to escalate. We move on once again, where tensions remained high along the Israel-Lebanon border. The Israeli military confirmed it carried out an airstrike in southern Lebanon, killing 2 individuals in the town of Ziqim, according to the IDF. The strike targeted Hezbollah operatives who were attempting to rebuild what they described as a terror infrastructure using an engineering vehicle. Lebanon's health ministry also confirmed the deaths, stating the individuals were operating a bulldozer at the time. The incident follows continued clashes along the border, with Israel's military leadership vowing to take offensive action while fortifying defences. The leader of Turkey's main opposition party called for the expected elections to be held at the latest in November, following the country's most widespread unrest in a decade. In the days following Imamoglu's arrest, the CHP drew tens of thousands of people into the streets of Istanbul and in many other cities to denounce the coup d'etat. In response, Turkey has clamped down on protests, with authorities detaining nearly 2,000 people, including several hundred students, journalists and young people. Özel said that the protests were the greatest censure in history, as people stepped out to show their massive disapproval against the then government's functioning. Here's what Özel had to say.
Varsa, geleceksin. Eğer istiyorsan Haziran'ın ilk haftasında en kısa takvimle. Yok, yetişemem. O zaman görev sürenin yarısında. En son Kasım ayında çıkacaksın ve adayımızla yarışacaksın.
Now shifting our focus to Africa, where around 30 people have died in flooding in the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, the provincial health minister confirmed on Sunday. Torrential weekend rains caused the river to overflow, sweeping through homes and cutting off roads. With Kinshasa's population of 17 million left reeling, many neighbourhoods remain without power or water. Governor Daniel Bumba blamed illegal housing and warned of potential evictions. Let's listen to what the locals had to say.
Il y a des boutiques à kati biloko nyonso bebi. Il y a des véhicules biloko nyonso bebi. Bandako kuei batu bakufi. Batu bakangami. C'est boza na drone bo matsadon bo mande batu bakangami na bandako ti likolo baton. Et comme il y a des vidéos bimisi boa tunde to mo futa pona kolanda batu sume.
Hydrologist Dr. Raphael Shingmanga noted that long-term human impact had weakened the river's capacity to hold floodwaters. The disaster adds pressure to the country, already battling M23 rebel violence in the east, where over 7,000 have died this year alone. We move over to Europe once again, where a manhunt is underway after 3 bodies were discovered in a residential building in Wietelfeld, a village in western Germany. The victims, a family consisting of a 47-year-old man, a 44-year-old woman and a 16-year-old boy, who were found after the suspect fled the scene. Police have warned local residents to stay at home and avoid picking up hitchhikers. A special task force and a police helicopter have been deployed in search, and which will continue overnight. Wheatfield, with a population of around 2,200, is on high alert, and the local mayor expressed shock over the tragic event, saying he never imagined such violence in his small community. Let's turn to the Indo-Pacific now, where South Korea is preparing for a snap presidential election, with the cabinet expected to finalise June the 3rd as the official polling date. This comes just days after President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office by the Constitutional Court for violating his duties. Yoon had declared martial law in December and mobilised troops to stop parliamentary proceedings, an act that led to his ouster. According to South Korean law, a new election must be held within 60 days of a president's removal. While the June the 3rd date has been widely reported, officials say it will only be official once declared by acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. The cabinet is set to meet on Tuesday to approve the election date, which would also be a national holiday. Let's turn to North America now, where a second child has died from measles as an outbreak of the highly contagious virus continues to grow in western Texas. The school-aged child was not vaccinated and had no underlying health conditions and was in hospital suffering from complications from the disease. In a statement posted on social media, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy confirmed the child's demise. He also paid a visit to the epicenter of Texas's still-growing measles epidemic. The same day, a funeral was conducted for the second child. The US has recorded more than 600 cases of measles so far this year, nearly 3 times as many as the 285 cases that Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recorded of all of last year. Many of this year's cases were recorded in unvaccinated people and are related to the outbreak that began in western Texas. Cases in New Mexico, Oklahoma and Kansas are likely linked to the original outbreak, public health experts say. We move to South America now, where in Brazil, supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro rallied in Sao Paulo, backing him just weeks after the Supreme Court voted to put him on trial. Bolsonaro is accused of conspiring to overturn the 2022 election results, which he lost to President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. If convicted, he could face a lengthy prison sentence. The gathering of Paulista Avenue comes after a smaller than expected turnout at the previous event in Rio de Janeiro. Bolsonaro, who called on his supporters to join the protest, said the formal purpose of the rally was to demand amnesty for those convicted in January the 8th, 2023 attacks on Brazil's government buildings. That violent episode saw thousands storm the Congress, Supreme Court and Presidential Palace in an attempted coup just days after Lula da Silva's inauguration. Bolsonaro is already banned from holding public office until 2030 for undermining Brazil's electoral system. We move to the Indo-Pacific once again, where for the first time in 6 years, North Korea has hosted the Pyongyang International Marathon, bringing together around 200 foreign runners in a rare glimpse of life inside the reclusive nation. The event began in 1981 and it returned after a pandemic-induced pause and is held annually in April to mark the birth of North Korea's founding leader, Kim Il-sung. The marathon route showcased key landmarks across the capital, including the Arch of Triumph and the Myanmar Future Scientist Street. Participants had to enter the country through organised tours, mainly offered by Koryo Tours, with packages priced at over €2,000. Spectators filled the Kim Il-sung Stadium, waving gold paper flags and cheering on runners, while local athlete Pak Dong said public support helped him push through fatigue. No official race results have been released. This marks one of the few instances of international tourism allowed since Pyongyang started easing COVID-19 restrictions last year. We move on now, where we move on. You can see visuals of the marathon there in Pyongyang, the North Korean capital. Asian market equity plunged on Monday, hitting multi-year lows as concerns over a potential global recession intensified following the announcement of harsher than expected US tariffs by President Donald Trump. Investor sentiment deteriorated sharply across the region with no signs of de-escalation in the ongoing US-China trade dispute. The sell-off was triggered by the White House's firm stance on implementing sweeping tariffs coupled with China's retaliatory measures, which included additional levies on US imports. China declared the markets had spoken for their retaliation through levies on US goods. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.